So now the third talk is the Catechetics and religious education. And I want to get to your question, and I'll get you to ask it again just for the sake of the...
Oh, I can't remember.
Well, I only remember half of it.
Hit the red button.
Tell her the
What
half.
was
She
it
might
talking
remember the
about? I've
rest.
always
It was about the sacraments and the
Yes.
children.
Oh, that's right, the parents and stuff.
Yeah.
So-
See, I need a hand.
Why is it, so the question is, why is it really, to formulate it, that so many parents come out of the woodwork at sacramental program time and still want their children to receive the sacraments, even though they're actually not interested in being connected with the church and Sunday Mass worship on a regular basis? What's going on? Is it just a residue from someone else, some faith gone by? Or is it the residue from someone else's acting faith, for instance, a grandparent or grandfather, mother, someone, or an uncle or an aunt who's putting a bit of pressure under the family? And we all know that life doesn't exist in a vacuum. So there are various, there are all various pressures.
But Father, this is happening in the Catholic school, where a lot of the education of it now is up to the parents, the commitments of the parents. But a lot of the work is done through the school, so they see their friends
But it's also
doing it, and so they want to jump on the bandwagon. Oh, I'm going to do it because she's doing it.
Well, exactly. There is a certain peer group pressure, because my classmates are all making their first communion and they're making their confirmation and they're making their first reconciliation, and I don't want to be left out. But many parishes that I know of, at least in this diocese, it's gone to a parish-based sacramental program, precisely because the schools, before, many families who were in the school were actually not involved in the parish. If you had most people going in the parish, who are going to the school, going into the parish, then it would be fine to have the parishes do it, but to the schools rather to do it. But when that's not the case, then it's actually a misunderstanding of what the real education is supposed to happen. One of the things so regardless of why, the reasons parents want their children to receive the sacraments, what we as members of the church, priests or lay, regardless of our role, what we cannot do is aid and abet an attitude that is actually incorrect. So we've got to teach the truth in love. And we've got to teach the understanding of the sacraments, that the sacraments are not a rubber stamp that we basically go through and then that's it. In America, and sometimes here too, some priests joke around and say that the sacrament of confirmation is the sacrament of the faithful departed. Why? Because as soon as they're confirmed, you never see them again. And it's a bit cynical in some way, but it's often true. So I think all we need to do is, this is my view, and there are other priests and certain bishops who have different views to me. Some think we should just keep on going as we've always done. But if you do what you've always done, you will get what you've always gotten. And clearly the times have changed, and what worked in the past doesn't work now. So I think if anything's got to be done, the mold has to be broken. But how do we break the mold, and what do we put in its stead? And this is an important part of catechetics and religious education, because it means we've got to get into an understanding of what is really happening. And what is really happening, or needs to happen, is, let me say what I think is really happening, and then I'll offer a solution, is that most families are not actually connected with the church. It's just nominal connection. And I'd love all the families, obviously, to be connected with the church, right? But to be connected properly, not tenuously. They think that by sending children to a Catholic school is how you show your connection with the church. It isn't. That's how you go to educate your children. And, last year, and it continues, the whole discussion about and debate about education and funding for Catholic schools and la-da-da-di-da. But what we've got to engage the parents to be connected with the church. And this can only happen through an authentic conversation with them. And so catechetics and religious education really involves a profound conversation with the parents. And that means a conversation with them in terms of their own life of faith, in terms of their own relationship with Christ, in terms of their own beliefs and unbeliefs and whatever. I mean, as in the break I was just talking to someone and saying, if children hear things about resurrection and incarnation and reincarnation, but they just don't know the difference. And they'll think, oh, incarnation of Jesus, reincarnation and incarnation, they don't know the difference. There's a huge difference. One is God becoming flesh. Reincarnation is philosophically a metaphysical impossibility, we say, because how can a frog come back as a cat? How can a cat come back in another life as a dog? If you are no longer a cat, you cease to be a cat. What they perhaps mean is the spirit of a cat coming back as a dog, or the spirit of a frog, and then you get into a whole lot of other philosophical nonsense conversations. But you know, it's a mixture. So they need clear and direct teaching, and the teaching has to be profound. So I find, one of the things that I do as my solution to this, and it certainly needs to be an ongoing thing, is as I'm talking to parents, particularly who come for baptism, pardon me, who come for baptism, and as I get the feel of where they're at, why they want baptism, why they want the sacraments, then I start to talk to them. I said, it's really all about your own life of faith. Now, are you prepared to be engaged more with the church? Do you want to be more engaged with Christ? And so forth. And if I sense that they're not really at that place, I go out of my way to free them up to not go and continue in this direction. In other words, so that they don't feel bad by not bringing the children for the sacraments, because they're actually bringing them for the wrong reason. So their motives are not upright. And if we encourage parents to receive the sacraments and encourage their children to receive the sacraments from non-upright motives, then we have become aiders and abettors in something that's an abuse really of the sacrament. And you might say, well, are we not locking the doors then to someone else down the future who could come back? No, not at all. We have applied that same philosophy for 40 or 50 years. Have they all come back? No. The reality is they haven't come back. I was told when I was leaving school, I left high school 30 years ago, oh, they'll all come back, Mark, don't worry, they'll all come back. Really? Really? I can count on one hand, two hands probably, the number of boys in my high school class who are still going to Mass each Sunday. They all still have, most of them that I meet when I go to the reunions, a great respect for the priesthood. And to think that one of their class is a priest. That's a very different thing from actually having a living faith. And so, but when I say it's better to not continue to bring your children to the sacraments until you're ready, what the church is saying is not no, she's saying not yet. What's the not yet? They're not yet until you are ready to receive them, so that when you do receive them, they will do for you what they are supposed to do. And then, in fact, it comes home here, particularly with baptism classes is one thing, when couples come to the church for marriage and marriage preparation, and after a 40-minute conversation, 45-minute conversation, it's pretty clear to me that they really don't want a sacramental marriage. So I ask them, well, why are you here? Why do you want to be married? Well, it'd be nice, and official. They've lived together for 5 years already, and it'll be official and it's good. And then I say, you know what? Why don't you just continue living together? And then, in fact, you know what? Why don't you get married on the beach? If you could have a choice to get married on the beach or in the park, which one would you like? Oh, on the beach, I like that. Well, get married on the beach. And they say, oh, and they look at you as if you have two heads. They say, Father, why are you saying that to me? I say, because it's more important before God that you act with honesty rather than stand up in front of me in a few months' time and make a whole lot of promises that you really don't believe in. True?
Mm-hmm.
And they give you the nod. And I say, oh, but Mum will be upset if I don't, I said, you know what? I understand that. I take your point. But the good news is, your mum's not the one getting married. You are. And so I free them up to make a genuine decision, an honest decision. And then I'm very clear about them. I say, look, the church will not recognize your marriage. In the eyes of the church, your marriage is invalid. I'll tell you that. But in the eyes of God, He will look upon your decision with more benignly because you've been acting with integrity and honesty before God. You will be doing something because you believe in what you're actually doing. And I say 5 years' time, 10 years' time, you rediscover your faith, then come back to the church and the church will receive your vows and backdate them and bless your marriage. So now, and I said, you don't have to make a decision now. You think about it and let me know. And I'll call you in a week or 2 weeks' time, say, yeah, Father, we've decided to, not to go get married on the beach. Or you don't hear from them anymore. And that's fine. I don't mind losing someone in that way, because that, to me, I don't count that as a loss. I actually count that as a victory. I've actually managed to connect with them in a real relationship. At the end of the day, the salvation of the world, is that my problem? Absolutely not. It's God's problem. I'm just one of His ministers, only one. And I will do whatever He wants me with those people that He places in my path. I'm here with you today because I've been given the opportunity. For many years in this diocese I've been here and haven't had the opportunity for a whole lot of reasons, right? But the point is, that's my role before God to do now. And God is very patient. And so, look at yourselves as teachers in the public schools. Most of the children you teach go to Mass? Of course not. Are they likely to start going to Mass after 2 years of teaching with you? Great classes, prepared well? They're not. Why not? Because that's the situation you're working with. Are you not giving them mixed messages then? Because you give them a message about faith and God and eternal life and hope, and then their families are undoing that. You know what? I'll let God bring that out in the wash. I'm going to do my bit, and then whatever else happens, happens. And that's all we're called to do. Saint Teresa of Calcutta says, we're not called to be successful. We're called to be faithful. We're called to be faithful. And that's actually a very consoling thing. Because they used to tease her sometimes. Okay, have you solved the world hunger? Have you solved hunger in Calcutta? Have you... Oh, well, last year though, there were 1,797 less hungry people in Calcutta because of the work we did. So there's one less hungry person. And I just think, but you might get somebody coming up to you 10 years, 15 years from now and pull you up in the street and say, you don't remember me, but boom, 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 and you taught me scripture in class. And they may not be going to Mass or anything, but I've remembered some of the things that you've taught me. And some of those things may have gone into making some of their decisions in life, big or small. Fundamentally, the work of catechetics and religious education is always keeping in mind that you or me or whoever is involved in it is actually shaping another human being. Shaping another human being made in the image and likeness of God. And education is profoundly about establishing a relationship. Because you want to impart things to them, fine, a whole lot of knowledge. But you want to impart, or information, but you want to impart knowledge as well. Which means teaching them how to use that information about the faith. In fact, yesterday's reading, we're taught, St. Paul's talking to the Corinthians, and he's saying, knowledge, yeah, everyone has it, but knowledge puffs up. Because St. Paul was a very knowledgeable man. Knowledge puffs up. It doesn't have to, but it can puff up. And I know I've seen this happen. It's love that builds up. So when knowledge is imparted in love, then it's done as an act of service. When it's done in arrogance, it just destroys. It's an abuse of the thing. So when you're there as teachers, you are winning them, you're trying to reach out to them through the relationship that you have, and you're winning their confidence. And you're essentially trying to teach them not only about faith, but you're also trying to teach them about morals. And you realize that as a teacher in their lives, the morals that you're going to be teaching them as a Catholic are going to fly right in the face of the morals they're going to get at home that evening. And that's just the reality. So the concept, the conflict that could result, we've had some good questions here that bring out this tension. You know what? The cards will fall as they will. You teach to the best of your ability, using what you know to be right, walking prudently, judiciously, choosing your words carefully, so that you win the child's heart. And I assure you, if you succeed in winning the child's heart, then you will have had victory. Because then the relationship is open, and they will take what you have on board, and that, believe it or not, will enter into the reservoir of their memory, and Lord knows when it will come out. Yes.
Father, sometimes you've got a family situation where the parents don't go to church, but with the kids getting religious scriptures, you can call it,
Yes.
they can, in some families, go home and convince the parents to come back to the church. The kids can do that.
Yes, absolutely. Precisely because kids are a powerful witness. Children are amazing. I mean, children are not only a powerful witness to tell their parents that, oh, Mum, we should go to McDonald's. Oh, we want to go out to eat,
Yeah.
and then parents give in to that.
Yeah.
Oh, I want to play sport. I want to give in to that. You know what? I want to go to church because church is good. Oh, church is rubbish. Church is good and church is great, and if I go to church, I will go to heaven. And if I don't go to church, I'll be a bad person maybe, or I'll lose my way. I mean, children will learn, and children are amazingly, in their conscience, they're so innocent and so teachable, and we can be a bit cautious not to want to reveal certain things to them because we don't want to rob them of their innocence, and that's very important, right? Certain things should not be said to a child in the years of innocence. The obvious case, when a child starts asking about life and how did they come into existence and whatever, and you can answer a child's question like that in a very simple terms, God brought you into this world, but how did that happen? Or God does it mysteriously, and it's hard for us to understand. Okay, and they understand. When they're a bit older, they can understand, and you tell them then. So that's one thing. But the children also, if we hold back from saying certain things to them, the truth that sets them free, in the hope, because we think somehow it's going to cause difficulties or whatever, the reality is there are a whole lot of others, and some of them being their own parents, who really don't care about giving them the truth. So I would rather give them what I know to be a treasure and something that can help them later on in life, rather than not give them that at all and somehow think that they're going to grow up to the age of 18 and somehow be able to make a decision about what is right and wrong and what is faith-filled and or what is not. And this is again a mistake that's made sometimes from parents who refuse to get their children baptized, and they say, oh, we let them make a decision themselves about God when they get older. And I say to them, you know what, when your children are 18 years of age or older, the world will already have made their minds up for them, and will have robbed you, and you will have abandoned the opportunity that you had as parents to actually teach them. Why don't you give them the best of what you have now? Later on, believe me, as sure as I'm standing here, they will make a decision regardless. One way or the other, and you'll work out whether you've succeeded or failed in terms of passing on the faith. But in order to make a choice, we actually have to have options. If the only option was one thing, there's no options. So if my secular culture is the only thing in front of me, then how on earth can I know any different? I can't. A couple of quick things, some of the best teachers in my own life, and then I'm going to let you go. My parents, two of the greatest teachers I've ever had. Mum, year 11 education, dad, year 8. But they grew up in wholesome, good families. And a Christian brother who I went and assisted at his burial a few months ago, Brother Bell, who died at the age, I think it was 101 or nearly, just short of 101. No, he didn't make 100, he was just short of 101. Anyway, Brother Bell, a story about my father and a story about Brother Bell. My father would come home from night shift, and he would go straight to the 7 o'clock mass in our parish, as we had at that time, and he would come back then at 8 o'clock. I've just woken up and I'm having breakfast, or quarter past 8. I'm getting ready for the 9 o'clock mass. I've had a lovely night, 9 hours sleep in my warm bed, and I'm 14 at this stage, and he's talking to Mum at breakfast. Oh, I fell asleep during the homily today. I wonder if that counts as my Sunday obligation, my Sunday mass. And my mother, as the good wife, she said, of course it does. God knows you've been working for the family all night long. As an ungrateful 14-year-old at the time, I remember thinking to myself, yeah, you've got to go to mass like the rest of us, and you've got to be paying attention and listening. And I didn't say that, right? I would never dare to say that. But I thought it. But I realised only later, when I came to bury him 17 years ago, I thought, wow, my father was a powerful teacher in the faith for me, because he showed me through that example and many others that God was the most important in his life. It wasn't work, it wasn't his family. His family were next, but he feared God more than he feared his family or his work. And I thought, well, realize what a man of integrity he was. And I realized too that at the time when he died, he'd been married with Mum for 36 years. I realized at that point that he had actually fulfilled or brought to fulfillment a promise he'd made to my mother on their wedding day. I will love you and honor you all the days of my life. Well, we know that faithfulness is something that plays out day by day, not just at the moment. So at the moment when my father died and that marriage ended, I realized you have finally kept your promise to the full. And she had kept hers to him. So that was the example of my father there. My brother Bell, and I could tell you many more stories about him, but we haven't got time. Brother Bell used to teach us mathematics, or taught me mathematics, but he taught us religion through mathematics. And how would he do this? He would do it through teaching us good moral lessons. He would, for instance, we'd finish class at 3:10. The bell goes at 20 past, and he was fond of telling us, boys, it's not this bell, that bell that says when to go, it's this bell that says when to go, when we go out. But, you know, what would he do? He'd say, mustn't waste your father's hard-earned money. He goes on the blackboard and with chalk just writes on 3 or 6 sums to do, so that we are working until the end. Now, what was Brother Bell trying to teach us? Was he saying, you know, well, you can't have an early mark, that you don't need rest, that you're always, it's all work and no play, you know, the English saying, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. So he wasn't trying to say that. He's trying to say, your parents have sacrificed a lot to send you here, so that you can get an education. You're learning maths now, but it's about all the things that happen at this school. Or we're about to go for our break and holidays. And he would say to us, boys, put your pens down now. Before you go on holidays, I'd like to talk to you a bit about your holidays. And what's he going? He's talking to year 8 boys, right? So 13 and 14-year-olds. What do 13-year-old and 14-year-old boys get up to in the holidays? Nothing, of course, you know. And well, he would say, boys, you can have fun, you can play footy and do all sorts of good things with each other, but you don't have to sing. You think, oh, and he'd tell us. He said, you know, and what sort of sins, you know? Well, you know, you tell each other dirty yarns or get up to some impurity thing, looking for some pornography or something harmful like that. And he'd never call it pornography, but he didn't have to. He didn't have to. But he would refer to these things. What was he doing? I thought, this guy's a genius. He was teaching us these things, and it was just before holiday time. And I loved him for that, because I realized this man lives what he says. In my simple mind as a 13-year-old or 12 or whatever I was at that time. So he was a great influence on my life, and I just want to leave you with one little homework for yourselves. As you're teaching your children, think of the great teachers, the greatest teachers in your lives, and see what lessons you've learned from them, and emulate them with your children. Thank you very much.
Thank you.